can be a very lonely experience, I can tell you that. Because if you're absolutely adamant about coming off drugs, or alcohol for that matter, it's important you have to put things in place. So in some cases, it's best to change your number so your dealer doesn't have your number. If you're finding in the sense that money is becoming a trigger, maybe reach a trusted friend and see whether he or she could save the money for you. Sometimes if it means walking to work or going wherever you need to go, take a different route. As you make these changes, you'll begin to notice in the sense that you are cutting people out of your life. And I suppose in the sense that when attachments come into play, attachments can be either wonderful things or dreadful things. And with attachments in the sense, it can basically lead us to cause a lapse or relapse. Some people tend to find that by the time they've had enough and need to stay away from drugs, it normally means staying away from a particular area.
I was worried about stopping smoking because I thought it would sort of eliminate me from my social group, because I was like hanging out with a lot of smokers, and for some reason I felt that like smokers were actually really like fun people to be around and everything, and I thought that people that wasn't smoking were like boring. But obviously since giving up since 2008, I've actually found that not to be true. In fact, I can't stand the smell of smoke or anything associated with it anymore, so I'm so glad I actually gave up.
For me, the addiction for me was always very much about holding on to the past and things that, it was like an emotional thing I was holding on to. So because I wasn't able to deal with it or process all of it, and I knew it was there, I used something to try to suppress it. But I think I've finally got to a point right now, and it might have something to do with age or just development, is that I'm like, I actually don't really need this to fulfill.
And the fact is, no one can, people can address it as much as they want, but until you have that epiphany, people can tell you, you can go in and out of rehab, but you've got to find the substitute for that. Because really, the vehicle is pain, and you forget about the pain, you forget about all those things that are making you feel horrible and insignificant, or whatever your pain is. And you've got to address what that is.
I don't really need this to get me through anymore. I've been getting through without it. And to be honest with you as well, there's been times I thought, well, I could actually just keep doing what I'm doing and get through. But I can't, because there's something about it being so captivating and so seductive that that started to take over. And when I really wanted to be me and be grounded in my own reality and where I wanted to be, I realised then I've got to let it go.
And little by little, and in small steps. And I think that people are under the impression that you can just go to rehab and it's all over with. All rehab does is clean you up for 30 days and then throw you back into the general population, because that's what you have to do. And, stepping away from the people that actually are triggers for you is one thing, but any kind of drug is all around you all the time. And it's about how you cope with it.
And plus for me also, my spiritual life is really important to me. That's all I've got that no one can define. That's when I said that the addiction was taking up too much of my spiritual life and I needed to leave it. I had a choice, that's what it was, I had a choice. I'm a dreamer. When I say I'm a dreamer, I don't mean like I just go through, like I dream prophetically, and I dream just the everyday mundane things that just help me get through. And for me, my addiction was taking me away from that. And it was not just my substance abuse, because if I get too overly involved with codependence as well, my dream life and my spiritual life can take a bit of a back seat, and I wasn't prepared for that. So I just think you have to I had to think about, what am I prepared for? Am I prepared to continue doing this for the rest of my life? I have to work this out after my physical self has gone, or do I work with it here, where I am in the physical, and look at the challenges it's brought me and let it go now? And I did that.
When you want something, you go out and you do anything to go and get it.
Yeah.
So I think, like, when you kind of, even when you get into those heightened sort of using substances, be it alcohol, be it narcotics, so that's just I feel like I'm kind of more closer to the source, and it makes me feel like I'm closer to a higher source where I sort of once was. The world makes a kind of a sense. When I'm not under those influences, I don't feel like the world I belong. So, but when I've sort of understood that, then I've realised that you don't need the actual substances to go inwardly, i.e. being in meditation. You can still go and use that addictive energy to go and really find, because you want it so badly. And you realise that there's other ways in which... Well, I'm glad that I've learned 9 years just figuring it out, being a sort of an ex-smoker, and still knowing that even with... is you can still work on it on an inwardly addictive, and that is... For me, I'm still an addict because I want it more and more, is to get closer to that higher source where I once was. And now that I don't need to use substances for it, I can go do meditation, but I know that I'm shutting myself off from the world because I'm trying to still go and get that nourishment from in long periods of doing meditation.
If I could go back, and I kind of did it, but I fell prey to it, is that you don't have to follow the crowd. And if you're in pain, the beauty is now, certainly more so than when I was growing up, is that there's therapy. There are people that you can talk to. It's a fear and being lazy to change, because we are all creatures of habit. So it's hard. It's easier to maintain your routine than it is to step out of your routine and actually do something else. And it took everything in me, after being depressed for a while, to realize that I don't have to wake up one morning and go, that's it, I'm not doing it anymore. It's just small steps, because for a while I couldn't get out of bed.
We used to have a corner shop, and she's a Sikh woman, and basically she's not touched any alcohol or cigarettes, or no addictions that I'm aware of, but she's a Buddhist. She does meditation, and she's kind of had guidance through a teacher with some of the Sikh principles. It's kind of an offshoot of Sikhism. And basically, when she used to go to the temple, and she cooks every Sunday as part of her Sikh practice. But she sees the people that come to the temples that sometimes don't go there when it's raining. But when she used to open this shop, and be it raining, hailstoning, thunder, she would see her regular customers come in to buy the drink or the tobacco, and she'd be like, oh my god, they never would think twice about the weather. She goes, and she used to admire them, she used to call them the true believers. She goes, if they turned their addiction inwardly. I remember I used to saying this when I was 17, 18, and like, oh my god, you're like mad, you're actually like looking up to these people like they're just drunk or whatever. But she kind of was in awe about, like, wow, they really want it. And she just said if they can only turn that addiction inwardly, they'll be free from all bondage. They'll be enlightened people, because they've got that huge desire of doing whatever they need to do to get them coppers together to pay for that. And they're scrimpers, like, they won't give in till they've got it. And she goes, that's the kind of attitude you need to be a true believer.
In astrology, any planetary oppositions in a natal chart across a Scorpio-Taurus or 2nd 8th house polarity are signs of possible addictive tendencies, especially involving Neptune, Pluto, Venus, Sun and Mars. Neptune is also a good indicator of where drug or alcohol patterns lie, depending on the sign and house placement.
If I rather you find your healing through a natural process than doing drugs, healing, because it won't help. I'm glad that I did. One person have woke me up and slapped my face and told me that if you're sleeping everywhere, because when you're on the substance, it will put you through into something that you don't usually do. So I rather, think things thorough before doing things.
Realizing the triggers and underlying dynamics. What were you thinking just before you wanted a hit? Trace that thought back.
And the thing is that if more people actually, I feel, came right out and said, right, I've had an issue with this, you'd be surprised how receptive people are. And as well, you'd be surprised if you actually open up and talk about things, how many other people will come out and say, I can't cope.
Exactly, because I think even if you go back to like sugar or whatever, that's the first drug, so everyone's got this in common.
Oh yeah.
Society.
So, yeah, I think that's what it is, but I think the key to staying straight is finding out your Achilles heel and trying to work on that and letting go of a lot of stuff that you hold on to, because at the end of the day, it's just shit, really. It's just stuff. It's just stuff. It's happened. It's gone. Life goes on. It's like, but it's just getting to that point, which is not an easy point to get to.
I've worked with and lived with people who've had a heroin addiction, and I basically chose a more organic sidestep to it, which was marijuana brownies, where you just cook it clean and put it in as the oil in your Great British Bake Off sort of recipe, and it sort of almost feels like that kind of calming for some, get high on heroin feeling. It kind of gives you something akin to it, which is a little bit more psychedelic. It's not just a bunch of candy that sort of damp you down a bit. You're actually, and very little goes a long way. So you're actually not flooding. You're actually not putting that much into your system. So a brownie could last for 5 or 6 hours. It's a slow buzz, and the psychedelic quality, from my first-hand experience, is such that it's a momentum, a sort of low, slow burning momentum builds, a sort of psychedelic momentum, and you ease out of it, right? And so, it's something you can't do very often, and you will sleep hard. It just kind of gives you a rest and a respite and a slightly different perspective on what you've been pursuing.
So it really helped me, but I still went back on it. But I got to a point now where I'm right. I know what I need, and it's just it's so simple. Let go.
Whatever that darkness is that you hold in your heart, and then the stigma of you don't want the shame, you don't want people realizing. And I think that there'll be some people that walk away from you, but for the most part I find that everybody's got their thing, whether it's alcohol, whether it's food, whether it's shopping, whether it's I don't know, how many other things?
I find
exercise.
I find like food, the ones to do with the body, like sex and food, can be often the hardest ones, because the drugs, when you stop doing them, you can actually put them in the past, but the food and the sex you carry on with, so they can become really problematic because you've still got to engage with the same function. When you feel anger towards a substance, see and treat it as a controlling enemy, an adversary that you're going to beat. Then you can move to stop the addiction. If you feel a victim to it, it's way harder. Timing is important. You will feel when the time is right to quit, and do it. Do you really want to turn a page and admit that nothing will get you that kind of high again, and be able to live without that high?
But it's also to just not beat yourself up about it and move on, and never forget that you are still addicted. Even when you're not doing it, you are still addicted. And I know for me, there are certain times that if emotionally I'm feeling upset about something, that is my go-to. It's still my go-to, you know, and sometimes I can be very sensible, and then sometimes it's just like, fuck it.
Or something like that.
I think there's always some kind of fear before you actually do give up. Because, there was something, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but there was something about me feeling like, oh my God, you know. But there was more in front of me that made me feel like, what am I... I'll be leaving behind all that part of me that feels like I can't lack. So I was more invested in what is there in front of me rather than staying here and what is my past and what I'm holding on to. So I wanted to let go because I didn't want to hold on anymore, and that's it.
I think if you're dealing with somebody who's got an addiction, I think it's really important to strengthen your boundaries so you know what you will accept and what you won't accept. I think it's really good to have a tough love approach. Strengthen your tough love because you're gonna need it in the relationship, especially with someone who's got a really strong addiction. I think it's really important to understand where that person is in the process of addiction. If they're going down a slope backwards and they're struggling to get out of it, but they have no capacity to do that at the moment, they're going to put their hands out to anybody. And if you put your hand out, and they're not ready to actually properly help themselves as well, there's a strong possibility you could get pulled into that situation, and you could get pulled in. So you've got to be mindful of that and where they are in the process, and respectful of their wishes, their timing, in whether that is right for them to give up or not. You can't force someone to do that. Also, going through the process again and again with somebody when they're going through a kicking and then reusing and kicking and reusing and kicking and reusing, it can be very emotionally draining. So I think it's very important to define how much energy you've got to give to this person, what you are prepared to give and what you are not prepared to give, where your very, very firm boundary lines lie, and have you got the capacity to fully commit to them, or you're just going to be a supportive person in the background, or whatever it is. I think it's very important to define your energy towards someone with an addiction, and then you can more properly help them where they're at that point in their particular addiction.
You'll know when the time is right. You know when the time is right to make those changes. And I think in the sense of you to say, right, I'm using heroin at the moment, you know, so some people can plan ahead, other people can't be in that position. Some people make those changes out of impulse or spontaneity because they've had a self-realization or they've had a moment of epiphany. So it's each to their own at the end of the day. But what I would say, in a sense, yes, I've been through the journey of going through detox, rehab, but in the end, when I finally did give up heroin, I didn't need to go to detox or rehab. Has it emotionally scarred me, my drug use? Yes, it has, because you're repressing those feelings that you don't necessarily want to face, until one day you basically have that moment and self-realization that the path you're following is so self-destructive that you either continue with that path or you make those positive changes.
But I do think that there's a time that you've got to realize that there's other things in life, and for me the saddest thing is the amount of time that I wasted instead of pursuing things that I wanted to pursue.
I do think that, you know when the right time is to give it up. Nobody should make you give it up. If you want to, you give it up. And to me, the right time, obviously, is when it impacted on my health. And yeah, I'm glad I've done it now. So good luck, whoever wants to give it up. And regarding addiction, I mean, do I ever want to smoke again? It never crosses my mind. I wouldn't even dream of picking up a packet of cigarettes or being around smoking in any way, shape or form. So I don't really believe that thing, once you're addicted, you're addicted. I think, you know, if you've got it in your mind to break it, then it's broken.
I hope in some way or another that my own life story could be of benefit to those people who are struggling. Having been there myself, I'm not here to judge anyone or you for that matter. But if you have that inner strength within inside you and you're able to talk to yourself by reflecting on such past experiences that have led you down that slippery, dark slope, always ensure that basically the changes you make come from you. If you feel peer pressurized by anyone to make these changes, but you don't yet feel ready, then be honest with that person and say, look, I want to give up drugs for myself, I want to give up alcohol for myself. I don't think I'm in that frame of mind to give it up when you tell me to give up. Always try and be honest with yourself. And in some way or another, if you find that loneliness is something that you cannot bear, because it means that you have to change your social circle of friends, there are always support groups you could attend to, or even that telephoning helplines like the Samaritans. If you need that human companionship, then that's something I would definitely advise you all to do.
But I got to a point now where I'm right. I know what I need, and it's just it's so simple. Let go.
Possession, power, alcohol, drugs, food, sex, love, porn, internet, gambling.